Welcome to my garage. Today we're going to continue the countdown for the top trivia-based TV game shows. Click on the links I put in here if you want to see the beginning of the countdown, numbers 15 through 6. And today we'll be covering the top 5, or at least my top 5 trivia-based TV game shows. But before we start, be sure to subscribe if you like what I'm putting out so you don't miss any videos. Like the video here to help me out. And also be sure to comment on the TV game shows that I'm posting. Let me know what I left off the list. What were your favorites? What are the ones you hate the most? Please comment and I'll be sure to respond to as many as I possibly can. So let's get back to the countdown. Number 5, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? One of the classic game shows in history, in my opinion. There's been many hosts through many syndications over the years, but Regis Philbin, who was the original, I think is still the best. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire wouldn't have had the success it had if it wasn't for Regis, in my opinion. So the format of the show, I think most people know, there's 14 questions that build up your dollar amount each time you get the question correct, and you could possibly win up to $1 million. This show also had lifelines. I think it's probably one of the first shows that started the whole lifeline idea. The lifelines changed a little bit over the years, but they did help some contestants get all the way to that top prize, or at least get higher dollar amounts. What I liked about this show specifically is the slow pace. I know earlier in my countdown I said some shows were a little bit slower paced, but the pace of this show is nice because it allowed the players to work through, reason through, do process of elimination to get down to what they thought the correct answer might be. And I really like that they were able to do that, especially when they went into using their lifelines. The one thing that I really didn't like about this show are the first couple questions. They were so easy. They were almost gimmies. And I think it just kind of wasted time, to get whatever it was, $50 or $10 or $100, whatever it was. And, maybe the format would have been better if they knocked it down from 14 questions to, say, 10 questions and just eliminated those easy ones and got right into the meat of the trivia earlier on in the process. But other than that was my number 5, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Number 4, Jeopardy! TV game show classic. It's been on for a long time, like over 39 years. There's been many hosts over the years, but honestly, I don't know how anybody can't agree with this or admit it. Alex Trebek, it's his show. Jeopardy is Alex Trebek. Alex Trebek was Jeopardy. So since Alex passed last year, the new hosts are kind of finding their way, figuring it out. There's been some guest hosts. They've kind of narrowed it down to Ken Jennings, who's one of the highest Jeopardy champions there ever were. And he's an okay host, in my opinion, but it's going to be kind of interesting to see where this game show goes over the next few years as they figure out the hosting dilemma. And I just want to throw this out because it popped in my head. But one of the guest hosts they had was Aaron Rodgers. And, while he presented himself very well, I really don't like Aaron Rodgers. And I really struggled watching the show when he was the host. It just didn't make sense to me why an active quarterback in the NFL at the time would be hosting Jeopardy. Now, this may have been filmed like when he was going to retire, in between seasons. I don't know what it was. I know I'm on a rant, but I don't like Aaron Rodgers. Don't understand why he hosted Jeopardy. I'll have to research it more maybe and get a better answer, but honestly, I didn't like that choice. My personal opinion. So, what do I like about Jeopardy? How could you not like that classic Jeopardy thinking music to answer the final Jeopardy question? awesome. Everybody knows it. I'm not going to sing it. I'll spare you that. But that's a great part of that show. And the other thing I really like is that the winner, the winner meaning the Jeopardy champion, keeps on playing show after show after show, keeps building their money that they could win into the millions. So, not a lot of game shows allow players to continue on from one episode to the next. So that's one thing I really do like about Jeopardy. But on the same point, what I don't like about it is that the second and third place winners don't get to keep all the money they earned on that show. So, the second place person gets $2,000, the third place person gets $1,000, assuming they had some positive number. But, if they earn $20,000, they should get the $20,000, in my opinion, even though they didn't win the show. One of the other things I really don't like about the show and why it only ended up as number 4 on my list is that the questions are really hard. This game is designed for the deepest, most intelligent, trivia knowledgeable people in the world. Those people that read encyclopedias every day of their life. And while it's good, the general person may struggle watching this show or playing along on this show because the questions are so hard. Too many questions about literature, history, kings and queens and rulers, and the word game questions they have where words that begin with an A and end with a T, things like that. It's so hard to come up with those questions as quickly paced as that show is for the general trivia buff. And that's what I don't like about it. But again, classic show, only number 4 on my list because of some of those negatives. And also because Alex isn't around anymore. I'm trying to see what they're going to do with this host situation. Maybe it will bump up in the future if they get a good host, a longtime host. But right now, number 4. Here we go with number 3 on my list. Number 3 is The Weakest Link. It's had a number of hosts over time, but most recently it's Jane Lynch.
Welcome.
And I really like her. Her personality is good for the format of the show. How it basically works, if you've never seen it, is that there's 8 players kind of in a semicircle on the set, and questions are answered within a time limit, say like 2 minutes, and they answer however many questions they can in those 2 minutes. So Jane will ask the question in succession around this arc of 8 players. And the idea is that they're building money for every correct question they get. So they correct, they get money, correct, they get money, correct, they get money, until someone decides to bank that money. So one of the players could say bank, and they'll bank that $3,000.
Takes place in the undersea town of Bikini Bottom.
SpongeBob SquarePants.
Correct. Michelle, in humans, what is the most common eye color worldwide?
Brown.
Correct. Graham.
Bank.
Meghan Markle went from actress to duchess when she married what British royal?
Prince Harry.
Correct.
If they continue to let that money grow without banking and someone gets a question incorrect, that goes back down to 0 and they start the banking routine over again. And whatever money is banked at the end of the round is what they get to keep going forward. So what happens is after each round, some statistics are provided by the background announcer of who is the strongest player, who is the weakest link. And what happens is that the players all decide to vote off a player. So they all say, I want to vote out Joe, I want to vote out Mary, I want to vote out Joe. The player with the most votes gets voted out of the show, even if they weren't the weakest link. It's who they vote out. For whatever reason they decide to vote them out, they get voted out. So then it goes down to 7 players, and then 6 players, and 5, and so on. So each round, the players left continue to try to build that money up by banking it and answering questions correct. And I guess just to kind of clarify, that's the name of the show, The Weakest Link. It's a chain of questions. It's a chain of money. It's a chain of people answering in succession. And when that chain is broken, that's the weakest link. That's the idea behind the show. So anyway, One of the things I also like about it, it's kind of hokey, but Jane continually teases and makes funny comments about the people, how they answer, about their jobs and things like that. Some of them are a little mean, but, obviously these people know what they're in for going on the show and that they're going to get kind of teased.
Who has a song in their heart and nothing in their head? Who thought IQ stood for I quit? It's time to vote off the weakest link.
But that is one thing that's funny about the show. So basically it gets down to the last two players, and they go head to head for whatever that total amount of money banked was for a single winner. Typically it's around $50K. So the winnings aren't real big on this show, but it's still a very fun show. The questions are pretty standard, well-known trivia questions, so it's fun to play along at home as well. The pace of the show is pretty quick for all the individual rounds, but when they get to the head-to-head round, the people playing get to kind of work through their questions, so it's a little bit more slower paced, and they could kind of figure out the questions. The thing about the questions on the show is they're not multiple choice. You have to know the answer. They're straight up answers. What is the name of blah, 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 and you have to know the name. So that makes it a little bit more difficult because there's not multiple choices. But overall, it's a great format. It's fast paced. It's fun. It's funny. And I like the show. Thus the reason it made it to number 3 on my list. Okay, moving to number 2, The Wall. So this show is hosted by Chris Hardwick, a great comedian, great host. I really like him on this show. And the format of the show, if you haven't ever seen it, is that there's 2-person teams. They're usually family members. And typically they have had some hardship in their life, or they're known for some kind of community service or something like that. So the show brings them on with the opportunity to potentially win lots of money to kind of give back to this family for the work they do in the community. If you haven't seen it, the set is this huge wall, like a gigantic pachinko style game where it's got all the pegs and it's got balls that drop down, and the balls fall into money slots at the bottom that are worth different values. So the way it works is the first round is really fast paced. The balls drop, they have to answer questions before they hit the dollar amounts at the bottom. It's a multiple choice, 2 choices, and they kind of start building their money if they get the questions right. The thing is that the show has a thing called green balls and red balls. If they get the question right, the balls are green and they win the money that the balls fall into. If they get the question wrong, the balls turn red and that money gets subtracted from the bank of money that they have. So they do this money building round together, and then the family members split. One of them goes into a soundproof room backstage, and that's the person that will actually answer the trivia questions. The other person stays out front with Chris and decides how many balls and what slots they're going to drop from to try to build that money up. So the way it works is a number of balls drop to build money, a number of balls drop to take money away. They have nothing to do with trivia or answering trivia questions. But the core center of each round has a few trivia questions that need to be answered, again, to either drop green or red balls, to either add to or subtract from the bank of money that they have. Now, the second round has $1 million slot. So, we've seen this show where the dollar amounts go up into the multi-millions at some point. But ultimately, those red balls have to drop, and it takes that money down. And in a lot of cases, it totally gets wiped out, and they end up with $0 left on the wall, which, in my opinion, it's one of the negatives is, they go through a whole show and they could potentially walk away with nothing, but that's the risk of the decisions they make. One little story I want to tell is I have a knack somehow to figure out what the question is by the answer. So the way the trivia questions work is they give the 4 possible answers that the player could pick from.
Home runs.
And I look at those answers and I go, oh, the question's going to be blah, blah, blah. And for some reason, I have like probably a 90% or higher guessing or figuring out what the question's going to be by the answers. Like, it might give 4 national parks as the answers. And I'll go, this is going to be, what's the first national park there ever has been, or something like that. And I don't know what it is, but I have a really good knack on this particular show of figuring out the question after seeing the answers. Like I said, some people win over $1 million or multi-million dollars. Some end up with 0. And the way the risk and reward works is the person answering the questions in that soundproof room has no idea what money is left on the wall at the end of the game. It could be $1 million. It could be 0. Earlier on in the game, when they do that cash building round, they have a guaranteed amount of money. So before that person in the soundproof room comes out at the end, they're given a contract. And that contract is that guaranteed money amount. They could either sign the contract and kind of go with what they believe that guaranteed money is, or they could rip the contract up and go with what's on the wall. So again, sometimes they have $1 million and that other family member will sign the contract and they walk away with $100,000. Sometimes they rip it up for $100,000 and they walk away with $2 million. Sometimes they walk away with nothing. Many, many times on this show, they walk away with nothing. And number 2, I'd like to see people win when they're on game shows, but because of the excitement, the suspense of this, of the balls dropping and where's it going to land, and did they sign the contract or did they not sign the contract, that's what I like about this game and why it ended up as number 2 on my list. So here we are at number 1, my top choice for a trivia-based TV game show. Drum roll. My number 1 is called The Chase. Now, a lot of people might not know about this show. It started out in Britain, and when it came to the U.S., it was on the Game Show Network, not real popular network. And most recently, though, a new version of this show has showed up on ABC. And first, let's talk about the original show on Game Show Network. That's where I became very interested in the show and learned to like it a lot. The host was Brooke Burns, and there was an expert trivia person that the players would go against on the show, and his name is Mark Labette, and his nickname was The Beast because he was this trivia wonder boy. He was like very intelligent, very knowledgeable, and was very hard to beat. So the current show now that's showing up on ABC periodically, the host is Sarah Hines, and the expert or the trivia experts on that show are mostly made up of past Jeopardy champions, but there's also other very knowledgeable trivia experts on that show. Some of the ones that are on there more regularly are Ken Jennings, James Holzhauer, people like that. So the way it works is there's 3 players, and each player builds money in a speed round on their own, individually asking questions in a 60-second time frame. And let's say they earn $40,000 in that time slot. Then that player goes up against the expert of the day. So that expert offers them a little bit of a challenge. He says, you could go for that $40,000 and I'll be 2 places behind you. So that means that they have 2 chances to get questions wrong before the chaser would possibly catch them. Chasing them, catching them. And then they make the offer of, let's say if you want me to be 3 paces behind you, we could lower that dollar amount to $5,000. But if you really want to take a risk and let me move 1 spot closer and only be 1 spot behind you in the chase, we'll allow you to possibly win $200,000. So then that person makes the choice, and then they start answering questions. They're multiple choice questions. It's relatively a slow pace at this part, and both the chaser, the trivia expert, and the player pick from a multiple choice question what they believe the answer is. If the player's right, they move down closer to banking that money. If the chaser's right, they also move down. So the idea is for the player to stay in front of the chaser and not let the chaser ever catch them before that money's banked. Let's say they get everything right, the money gets banked, they move on to the next round, and the second and then third player come in to do the same thing. If the chaser catches that person because they got a couple questions wrong, the money's gone, the person's out of the game. So what happens is after you go through that with all 3 players, whoever's remaining, it could be 1, 2, or 3 players, they go to the final round against the chaser. Whatever money they banked from their individual rounds is what they're playing for to be split among however many players they are. So 1 player keeps it all, or it could be split 2 or 3 ways. So what happens is, I think it's a 2-minute time frame. In 2 minutes, the 1 to 3 players left in that final round together try to answer as many questions as possible.
The chase is on. In Cajun folklore, what shape-shifting werewolf lives in the swamps of Louisiana?
Papa Legba.
Rougarou. In 1872, Susan B. Anthony was arrested and found guilty of illegally doing what?
Casting a vote.
Correct. The J&R Double Arch Ranch was the long-time vacation.
So let's say they answer 20 questions. Then the chaser answers 20 questions, completely different questions in the same 2-minute time frame, and they have to try to chase or get as many correct questions that the team did. So if the chaser gets, beats them and gets 21 correct, players are eliminated, no money is awarded. If for some reason the chaser does not answer more questions than the team answered, then the team walks away with the split bank of money. So I really like the format of the show. I like the way the 3 rounds are formatted. I like the way the chaser could eliminate people. The questions are good, really good in this show. They're general trivia for the most part. Some are a little bit more difficult, but with the questions, the format, and the pace, this is why I really like this show. Check it out if you haven't watched it. It shows up on ABC every now and then still. So there you have it, my top 15 trivia-based game shows. Once again, click the like button. Tell me what you thought about this. In the comments, tell me what you thought about this. What did I leave off the list? Is there a game show out there that's trivia-based that I didn't think about or I've never seen? Let me know about it. Maybe we'll do a video on that later on. And also, please be sure to subscribe so that you see everything I post and keep up to date with everything going on in my garage. That's it for today. And everybody have a wonderful day. And for now, the garage is closed.